In the soft grey hours before dawn, when mist clung to meadowgrass and dew gathered like tears on spiderwebs, the medieval world stirred with a weight that modern hearts can barely imagine. Sleep, that gentle refuge we now take for granted, was then a luxury stolen from a world that never truly rested. Picture a small village nestled in the valley between two gentle hills. The year is 1347 and the morning air carries the scent of wood smoke and wet earth. In a humble cottage with walls of wattle and daub, a woman named Margot opens her eyes not to the luxury of continued rest, but to the immediate press of survival. Her bed, if it could be called such, is a simple straw mattress laid upon a wooden frame. No soft pillows cradle her head. Instead, a rough sack filled with whatever could be gathered, dried herbs, wool scraps, even stones wrapped in cloth. The blanket that covers her is woven from coarse wool, scratchy against skin that has never known the comfort of fine linen. But comfort was not the enemy of medieval sleep. Fear was. As Margot rises, her first thought is not of coffee or a warm breakfast. It is of listening. In the pre-dawn silence, every sound carries meaning. The distant lowing of cattle could signal thieves attempting to steal livestock. The creak of settling timber might mask the footsteps of raiders. Even the wind through the thatch above her head whispers of vulnerability. Sleep in this world was an act of faith. To close one's eyes meant trusting that dawn would come without bringing bandits, wolves, or the dreaded cry of fire that could consume an entire village in moments. Rest was earned, not given, and even then it came with the constant awareness that safety was an illusion as fragile as morning frost. The medieval mind understood something we have forgotten, that true rest requires not just physical comfort, but the deep security of knowing one is protected. In a world where the nearest authority might be days away on horseback, where a failed harvest meant starvation, and where disease could sweep through a community like wildfire, sleep became a precious commodity measured not in hours, but in moments of stolen peace. Margot's husband, Willem, stirs beside her. His calloused hands reach instinctively for the simple knife that never leaves his side, even in sleep. This is not paranoia. It is wisdom learned from generations who understood that the night brought more than dreams. Together they listen to the world awakening around them. The roosters crow from their neighbour's yard, the distant church bell, marking the hour of Lauds calling the faithful to prayer. These sounds are not merely noise, they are confirmation that the community lives, that the night has passed without catastrophe, that another day has been granted to them by God's grace. In our modern world, we sleep surrounded by locks and alarms, police forces and emergency services, insurance policies and safety nets. We close our eyes in climate-controlled rooms, on mattresses designed by scientists, protected by systems that would seem like magic to medieval minds. Yet perhaps we have lost something in gaining all this security, the profound gratitude that comes from understanding sleep as a gift rather than a right. As the first pale light creeps through the single small window of their cottage, Margot and Willem rise not refreshed in our modern sense, but grateful. They have been given another day. Their sleep, though brief and watchful, has carried them safely through the dangerous hours of darkness. The medieval nap, when it came, would be snatched between moments of labor and vigilance. It would be taken in fields under the open sky, with one ear always listening for trouble. It would be found in the corner of a workshop while others kept watch, or curled in the straw of a stable with the warm comfort of animals nearby. But even these brief respites carried their own burdens. To sleep during the day meant trusting others with one's safety. It meant believing that those around you would guard not just their own interests, but yours as well. In a world where resources were scarce and survival uncertain, such trust was, perhaps, the greatest luxury of all. The sun climbs higher now, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Margot moves to tend the fire that has burned through the night, for to let it die meant the laborious task of rekindling flame, a process that could take precious time when every moment mattered. Willem checks their few possessions, ensuring nothing has been disturbed in the night. These morning rituals speak to the fundamental truth of medieval rest. It was never simply about the absence of wakefulness, but about the constant presence of care. Sleep was community activity, requiring trust, cooperation, and the shared understanding that everyone's rest depended on everyone's vigilance. As we settle into our own comfortable beds tonight, perhaps we can carry with us something of Margot and Willem's wisdom. Their understanding that rest is not merely the cessation of activity, but the presence of peace. That true sleep comes not from the softness of our pillows, but from the security of knowing we are held by community, by love, by something larger than ourselves. The medieval world may have been harsh, but it understood something profound about the nature of rest, that it is not a solitary act, but a communal trust, that the sweetest sleep comes not from luxury, but from the knowledge that we are safe, watched over, and valued by those around us. The afternoon sun filters through the leaves of an ancient oak tree, casting dappled patterns on the ground where a young shepherd named Thomas has found a moment's respite. His sheep graze peacefully in the meadow beyond, their bells creating a gentle music that speaks of safety and routine. For now, just for now, he can close his eyes. This is how rest came to the medieval world, not in great luxurious stretches, but in precious fragments, stolen from the relentless demands of survival. Thomas knows he has perhaps 20 minutes before the sheep begin to wander toward the forest edge, before their movement will require his attention. 20 minutes to let his tired body sink into the cool grass, to let his mind drift from the constant calculations of a shepherd's life. The art of the medieval nap was an art of timing and trust. It required reading the subtle signs that spoke of safety, the contented sounds of animals, the distant voices of other workers, the quality of light that told you how much day remained. It was sleep with one eye open, rest with one foot already, moving toward wakefulness. In the village below, a baker's apprentice named Eleanor has discovered her own moment of stolen rest. The bread for tomorrow rises in its bowls, covered with damp cloth to keep the flies away. The ovens have been banked for the night, their warmth still radiating through the bakery, but no longer requiring her constant attention. She settles onto a sack of flour in the corner, using a folded apron as a pillow. Eleanor's sleep will be measured not in hours, but in the rhythm of rising dough. When the bread has grown to twice its size, she must wake to punch it down, to shape it for the final rise. Her body has learned to wake precisely when needed, as if her dreams themselves can sense the needs of the bread she tends. This intimate relationship between sleep and work defined the medieval experience of rest. There was no sharp division between labor and leisure, no moment when one could truly step away from responsibility. Instead, rest became a dance performed within the constraints of necessity, a gentle yielding that never forgot the world's demands. In the scriptorium of A nearby monastery, Brother Francis has found his own version of stolen sleep. His work copying manuscripts requires intense concentration, the careful formation of each letter demanding steady hands and clear eyes. But in the warm afternoon light streaming through tall windows, with the soft scratch of quills around him, creating a lullaby of scholarly labour, he has allowed his eyes to close for just a moment. The medieval world understood something we have perhaps forgotten, that rest is not the opposite of work, but work's partner in a careful dance. The best rest came not from escape, but from the brief pauses that made continued effort possible. It was sleep that served purpose, rest that enabled rather than replaced productivity. Thomas the shepherd dreams of wolves that do not come, of sheep that need no watching. Eleanor dreams of bread that bakes itself, of ovens that tend their own fires. Brother Francis dreams of manuscripts that write themselves, of letters that flow like water onto waiting parchment. These are not dreams of laziness, but dreams of ease, the profound human longing for a world where necessary work requires no struggle. The medieval nap was often communal, taken in the presence of others who shared both work and rest. In the great halls of manor houses, servants would curl up near the kitchen fires, their sleep interwoven with the sleep of their companions. The warmth of shared breath, the security of familiar breathing nearby, the knowledge that others would wake. If danger approached, these were the true comforts of medieval rest. Harvesting seasons brought their own rhythm of stolen sleep. Workers would nap in the fields during the hottest part of the day, seeking shade beneath carts or in the shadow of haystacks. The grain would not wait. When ready, it demanded immediate attention, regardless of human exhaustion. So rest came, when work paused, brief and precious as dewdrops. The aristocracy, too, knew the art of the stolen moment, though their thefts were different in nature. A lady might find rest in her solar, the private chamber, where she could escape the formal demands of her position. But even here, rest came with its own responsibilities, the need to maintain appearance, to be ready for sudden summons, to remember, always the weight of example she bore for those beneath her station. Children learned early the skill of sleeping while remaining alert. They napped in corners of workshops while their parents labored, curled up with dogs for warmth, always ready to wake when called to help or to flee if danger approached. Their dreams were shaped by the sounds of safety, the ring of hammer on anvil, the creak of a spinning wheel, the murmur of adult conversation that meant all was well. As evening approaches and Thomas gathers his sheep for the return to the village, as Eleanor wakes to check her rising bread, as Brother Francis returns, to his careful lettering, we might wonder at their contentment. They have stolen perhaps an hour of rest between them, yet they wake not resentful of time's passage, but grateful for time's gift. The medieval understanding of rest teaches us something profound about the nature of contentment. It was not the quantity of rest that mattered, but the quality of presence within that rest. These brief sleeps were not escapes from life, but deeper entrances into it, moments when the soul could sink into the rhythm of work and world, finding peace not in absence, but in acceptance. In our age of measured sleep cycles and optimized rest, perhaps we have lost touch with this older wisdom. The medieval nap was not about efficiency, but about trust. Trust in community, trust in routine, trust in the fundamental order that allowed for brief surrender. It was sleep that knew its place in the larger symphony of days, rest that served not just the individual, but the whole intricate web of interdependent life. Tonight, as you settle into your own rest, consider the gift of undisturbed sleep, the luxury of time without limits. But consider too the profound peace that came to those who learned to find rest within limitation, who discovered that the sweetest sleep might be the briefest, the most precious rest, that which is stolen from a world that never truly stops its ancient, necessary dance. The stone walls of the Abbey Church hold more than prayers. They hold the accumulated rest of centuries. In the cool shadows where coloured light streams through stained glass windows, painting the floor in jewel patterns of blue and gold, a different kind of sleep has always been possible. Here, in the spaces set apart for the sacred, the medieval world found its deepest peace. Sister Marguerite kneels in the chapel during the hour of none, the afternoon prayer that marks the slow turn toward evening. Her voice joins with those of her sisters in the ancient rhythm of Gregorian chant, but beneath the music lies something deeper, the profound rest that comes from surrender. This is not the watchful sleep of the fields or the careful napping of the marketplace. This is the sleep of the soul, the rest that comes when human will yield to something greater than itself. The medieval understanding of sacred rest was built upon the Benedictine principle that prayer itself was a form of sleep, not the unconsciousness of the body, but the conscious letting go of the ego. In the 8 canonical hours that structured monastic life, from vigils in the deep night to compline at day's end, rest and wakefulness wove together in a pattern that knew nothing of our modern divisions. Brother Augustine has found his own sanctuary in the monastery garden where rows of herbs grow in careful order between paths of worn stone. The afternoon sun warms his bent back as he tends the plants that will become medicines, seasonings, and offerings. But his work here carries a quality different from the urgent labor of the outside world. Here, time moves at the pace of growth, itself measured not by immediate necessity but by the slow rhythms of seed and season. This garden sleep, the rest that comes when human effort aligns with natural process, was one of medieval Christianity's greatest gifts to the art of peace. Intending what God had made, the monks discovered a way of working that was itself a form of prayer, a kind of active rest that blessed both the worker and the work. The pilgrims who shelter in the Abbey's guest house carry their own understanding of sacred rest. They have walked for days or weeks to reach this place, their feet bloodied, their possessions reduced to what could be carried on bent backs. But here, in the safety of sanctuary, they sleep not just with their bodies, but with their souls. Margaret of Wessex has come seeking healing for her son, who burns with fever in their distant village. She sleeps now on a simple pallet in the women's dormitory, but her rest carries the deep peace of faith, the knowledge that she has done all she can do, that the remainder lies in hands larger and more capable than her own. This is the sleep of surrender, the rest that comes when human effort meets its limits and finds grace waiting. The cathedral in the nearest city offers its own form of sacred rest to those who cannot escape to monasteries. In the cool nave where merchants and labourers gather for Mass, where nobles and servants kneel side by side before the altar, a different equality emerges, the equality of those who seek the same eternal rest. Young William, apprentice to a weaver, has slipped away from his master's workshop during the afternoon break. He kneels now before a statue of the Virgin, his rough hands clasped in prayer, his eyes closed not in sleep, but in the deeper rest of devotion. Here, for these few minutes, he is not servant or master, not hungry or fed, not afraid or secure. He is simply a soul seeking peace, and in that seeking he finds a rest more profound than any physical comfort could provide. The cathedral's architecture itself was designed to induce this sacred rest. The soaring vaults that lift the eye toward heaven, the play of light through colored glass that transforms the ordinary world into something luminous, the acoustic properties that make even whispered prayers seem to resonate with eternal significance. All of this conspired to create spaces where the soul could rest even when the body remained alert. During the great feasts of the church year, Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, these sacred spaces filled with a particular quality of communal rest. The shared rhythms of standing and kneeling, of singing and silence, created a form of group meditation that allowed entire communities to find peace together. This was rest as collective experience, sleep as shared surrender. The anchorites, those holy hermits who chose to be sealed into small cells attached to church walls, perhaps understood sacred rest most deeply of all. Dame Julian, enclosed in her cell beside the church in Norwich, has chosen a life that is itself a form of conscious sleep, a daily dying to the concerns of the world in order to be fully awake to God. Her tiny space, barely large enough to kneel and lie down, contains everything necessary for life and nothing more. A small window opens into the church, allowing her to hear the services and receive communion. Another window faces the world, where those seeking counsel can come to speak with her. But the greatest window is the one that opens within her heart, the space where divine rest meets human longing. In her revelations of divine love, Julian will write of God's presence as a kind of cosmic sleep, not unconsciousness, but perfect consciousness, the rest that comes when all striving ceases because all needs are met. This mystical understanding of rest as reunion, of sleep as return to source, permeated medieval spirituality. The hermits who sought God in wild places, in caves and forests, on mountains and islands, discovered that sacred rest could be found anywhere human will surrendered to divine will. Their sleep under stars, their rest on stone, their peace in places where civilization feared to go, testified to a truth the medieval world held dear, that the deepest rest comes not from external comfort, but from internal alignment, as the light fades through the abbey windows and Sister Marguerite prepares for Vespers, as Brother Augustine leaves his garden for evening prayer, as the pilgrims settle into grateful sleep and the cathedral grows quiet in gathering dusk. Something eternal settles over these sacred spaces. It is the peace that passes understanding, the rest that restores not just body but soul. In our age of spiritual seeking and therapeutic sleep, perhaps we have something to learn from these medieval sanctuaries. Their understanding that rest is not merely personal but cosmic, not just physical but metaphysical, not simply the absence of activity but the presence of the sacred. In their stone walls and stained glass, in their gardens and guest houses, they preserved a way of sleeping that connected human rest to eternal rest, individual peace to universal peace. Tonight, wherever you lay your head, you participate in this ancient longing for sacred rest. Whether in cathedral or bedroom, monastery or apartment, the same deep need calls out across the centuries, the need for a peace that goes beyond comfort, a rest that touches something eternal within the temporal heart. The first snow of winter settles like a blessing over the village of Thornbury, transforming the familiar world into something soft and strange. In the cottage where old Henrik the blacksmith has lived for 47 winters, the quality of sleep itself changes with the white silence that muffles sound and wraps the world in gentle quiet. Medieval rest moved with the great wheel of seasons, each turn bringing its own rhythm of work and rest, its own texture of sleep and waking. The modern world, with its electric lights and heated homes, has forgotten how profoundly the natural year shaped human rest. But in Henrik's time, sleep was not a human choice imposed upon nature. It was a human response to nature's commands. Winter. Sleep came like a gift after the exhausting urgency of harvest. The shortened days and longer nights called the human body into a slower rhythm, a deeper hibernation that animals had always known. In cottages throughout the village, families drew closer together for warmth, their sleep becoming communal, not by choice, but by necessity. Henrik's wife, Astrid, lies beside him under layers of wool blankets and fur pelts, their 3 children nestled between them in the great bed that serves the entire family. Their combined breath creates a warm pocket of air in the cold cottage, their intertwined sleep a strategy for survival that has become something deeper, an intimacy born of shared vulnerability. The winter nap was different from all other sleep. It came early in the middle of short afternoon days when there was simply too little light for fine work. It lasted longer, stretching through nights that seemed to go on forever. It was deeper, the kind of sleep that felt like falling into the earth itself, becoming part of the great rest that held all living things. In the manor house on the hill, Lady Eleanor experiences her own version of winter's sleep command. The great hall, with its massive fireplace and thick stone walls, provides warmth that the cottagers below cannot imagine. But even here, even with servants to tend the fires and wine to warm the blood, winter imposes its rhythm of rest. She spends long hours in her solar, the private chamber, where ladies retreat for their particular work. But winter makes even this work sleepy. The slow stitching of tapestries, the careful illumination of prayer books, the quiet conversation with her waiting women. These activities blur the line between waking and sleeping, creating a twilight state of rest that matches the grey sky outside. Spring sleep, when it comes, carries a different energy entirely. As the first crocuses push through snow and the days begin their stretch towards summer, the human body feels the pull of awakening. But it is not the harsh awakening of alarm clocks and artificial schedules. It is the gentle stirring that matches the stirring of sap in trees, the movement of life responding to life. Young Robert, Henrik's apprentice, feels this stirring most intensely. At 17, his body pulses with the same energy that drives birds to nest and flowers to bloom. His spring sleep is restless, filled with dreams of the wider world, of adventures beyond the village boundaries, of the young miller's daughter whose smile has begun to appear in his nighttime visions. The spring nap becomes a luxury almost too sweet to bear. To sleep in new grass, with wildflowers opening nearby and the sun warm on closed eyelids, is to participate in the world's own awakening. These brief sleeps between the urgent work of planting and building feel like conversations with God, moments when human rest aligns perfectly with the earth's own rhythms of renewal. Summer brings its own sleep wisdom, its own commands and gifts. The long days that stretch from dawn to dusk create a different rhythm. Intense work during the cooler hours, rest during the heat of midday when even animals seek shade. The summer nap becomes not just rest but survival strategy, a way of avoiding the sun's power while storing energy for the cooler hours of productivity. In the hayfield surrounding Thornbury, the rhythm of summer work and rest creates its own music. Workers rise before dawn to cut grass while the dew still makes the work possible. They rest during the blazing midday hours, their sleep communal in whatever shade can be found, under carts, in the shadow of haystacks, beneath the spreading branches of ancient oak. These shared sleeps of summer work carry their own intimacy. The exhausted rest of bodies that have labored together, the sweet sleep of those who have earned their rest through sweat and effort, the peaceful breathing of people who trust each other enough to sleep without guard in open fields. Harvest sleep is perhaps the most profound of all seasonal rests. It comes after weeks of intense labor, after the successful gathering of the year's sustenance, after the community effort that means survival for another winter. This is sleep, as celebration, rest as gratitude, the peaceful breathing of those who know they have done what needed to be done. The harvest feast allows for a different kind of rest altogether, the sleep that comes after abundance, after ale and meat, and the singing that goes on until exhaustion takes the celebrants one by one. This is social sleep, community rest, the peaceful collapse of people who have worked and celebrated together. But perhaps the most teaching comes from autumn, the season that most honestly speaks of endings and the rest that waits beyond all human striving. As the leaves turn colors that speak of dying into beauty, as the air grows crisp with promises of winter's return, sleep itself takes on a different quality. Deeper, more accepting, touched with the wisdom of cycles that repeat endlessly. Old Henrik, whose joints ache more each autumn, understands this sleep of acceptance. His rest now carries the weight of years, the accumulated tiredness of a life lived in rhythm with seasons that ask everything and give everything in return. His sleep speaks of harvest completed, of work well done, of rest earned through decades, of response to nature's command. In the monastery beyond the village, the monks have built their entire lives around the recognition that human rest must align with cosmic rhythms. Their hours of prayer mark not just the passage of time, but the acknowledgement that human life participates in something larger, the breathing of the universe itself, the systolic and diastolic rhythm of creation. Brother Thomas, keeper of the monastery garden, has learned to read the sleep commands written in the turning leaves, the migrating birds, the quality of light that speaks of coming change. His own rest has become responsive to these signs, his sleep a conscious participation in the great seasonal dance. The medieval world knew something we have forgotten in our climate-controlled, artificially lit existence, that rest is not separate from the world but part of it, that sleep is not escape from nature but return to it. Their seasonal sleep carried the wisdom of alignment, the peace that comes when human rhythms match the rhythms of earth and sky. Tonight, as you prepare for your own rest, consider the season that holds you, the natural rhythms that continue, their ancient dance outside your windows. Perhaps in acknowledging these larger patterns, in allowing your sleep to carry some echo of the seasonal wisdom that once shaped all human rest, you might find a deeper peace, the peace of those who sleep not against the world, but with it, not despite nature, but within it. The evening light grows soft in the cottage where young Emma prepares for sleep with the careful attention that her grandmother taught her, and her grandmother's grandmother before that. Each movement is deliberate, each gesture part of a ritual that transforms the simple act of going to bed into something sacred, something that connects her not just to rest, but to the long line of women who have performed these same quiet ceremonies. She begins by banking the fire, covering the glowing coals with ash so they will hold their heat through the night, but not flare into dangerous flame. This is not simply practical, it is symbolic, the daily enactment of rest as controlled energy, sleep as guarded warmth. The fire, like human consciousness, must be neither extinguished nor allowed to burn wildly, but maintained in the gentle glow that will kindle again with morning's breath. The medieval world understood that sleep was not simply the absence of Wakefulness, but a state requiring its own preparation, its own rituals of entry. These ceremonies of bedtime were passed down through generations like prayers, each small action carrying meaning accumulated over centuries of practice. Emma's next ritual is the careful placement of her few precious possessions. Her wooden comb, carved by her father from a piece of apple wood, goes in its proper place beside the bed. Her single ring, inherited from her mother, is removed and placed where moonlight can touch it through the small window. Her everyday knife is positioned within reach but turned edge away, available for protection but positioned for peace. These placements speak to a profound understanding of rest as vulnerability. To sleep is to surrender control, to trust that the world will continue safely without conscious oversight. The bedtime ritual serves as a bridge between the alert self that has navigated the day's dangers and the surrendered self that must trust in protection beyond its own vigilance. In the great chamber of the manor house, Lady Isabel performs her own evening ritual, guided by the same wisdom but expressed through different means. Her waiting women help her remove the complex layers of her daily dress, the outer gown of fine wool, the fitted bodice that has shaped her form to social expectations, the intricate head covering that has marked her status throughout the day. But this disrobing is more than practical. It is symbolic death, the daily practice of letting go of social identity to find the self that exists beneath roles and expectations. As each layer falls away, Lady Isabel moves closer to the person she was before society claimed her, the soul that exists independent of station or duty. Her bedtime prayers, recited kneeling before a wooden crucifix, acknowledge both gratitude for the day's safety and trust for the night's protection. These are not desperate pleadings, but grateful surrenders, the conscious placing of human vulnerability into hands larger and more capable than her own. In the monastery, Brother Francis performs the most elaborate sleep ritual of all, Compline, the final prayer of the day that prepares not just individual souls, but the entire community for the journey into night. The ancient words, chanted in harmony with voices that have sung these same syllables for centuries, create a sonic cocoon that holds all the monks in shared peace. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit, they sing together, the words echoing in stone spaces designed to hold and amplify prayer. This is not just personal surrender, but communal surrender, the acknowledgement that individual sleep participates in universal rest. The ritual of blessing cells, of sprinkling holy water on simple beds, transforms each sleeping space into a sanctuary. The medieval understanding that rest requires sacred space found expression in these small ceremonies that made even the humblest bed a place where heaven and earth could meet. Children learned sleep rituals that would serve them throughout their lives. Little Marcus, the carpenter's son, helps his mother spread fresh straw on the family's sleeping platform, each handful placed with attention that transforms the mundane task into ceremony. He learns to shake out blankets not just for cleanliness, but for the symbolic clearing away of the day's troubles. His bedtime prayer is simple, a request for protection through the dangerous hours of darkness, gratitude for food and shelter, and a promise to use the gift of another day wisely if it should be granted. But beneath the simple words lies a profound theological understanding that sleep is not a human right, but a divine gift, not a natural process, but a miraculous suspension of consciousness that requires supernatural protection. The merchant class developed their own sleep rituals, combining practical security with spiritual surrender. Before retiring, the wool merchant carefully checks his locks, counts his money, and ensures his valuable goods are properly secured. But these practical precautions are followed by prayers that acknowledge the limits of human protection, the ultimate dependence on providence that no amount of preparation can guarantee. His wife performs her own evening ritual of household blessing, moving through rooms to ensure all is in order for the night. But her actions carry spiritual as well as practical meaning. The extinguishing of candles becomes a prayer for peace, the closing of shutters a request for protection, the checking of children a blessing upon their sleep. The most profound sleep ritual of the medieval world was the practice of preparing for death. Each night's sleep was understood as a small death, each morning's waking as a small resurrection. The evening prayers that prepared for rest included preparation for the possibility that this sleep might be the final one, that consciousness might not return with dawn. This was not morbid but liberating, the daily practice of letting go, the gentle rehearsal for the ultimate surrender that awaits all human life. By making peace with death each night, medieval sleepers found a freedom in rest that modern minds, with their illusion of permanence, rarely achieve. Dame Margot, the village wise woman, has perfected the art of sleep ritual over her 70 years. Her evening ceremony includes the brewing of chamomile tea, the lighting of a single candle that will burn while she prays, and the slow combing of her long, grey hair while she reviews the day's blessings and sorrows. Her ritual acknowledges the body's needs, the herbal tea that calms agitation, the gentle grooming that soothes tension but extends beyond physical preparation to emotional and spiritual clearing. She consciously forgives those who have wronged her during the day, asks forgiveness for her own failures, and places her concerns into hands more capable than her own. The seasonal variations of sleep ritual acknowledged the changing needs of rest throughout the year. Winter rituals focused on warmth and light, summer rituals on cooling and protection from insects. Spring rituals celebrated renewal. Autumn rituals practiced gratitude and preparation for the lean months ahead. But beneath all seasonal variations lay the constant recognition that sleep is sacred time, that rest requires reverence, that the transition from consciousness to unconsciousness deserves the same careful attention given to other threshold moments in human life. As you prepare for your own sleep tonight, perhaps there is wisdom in these ancient rituals, these careful ceremonies that transformed bedtime from mere habit into sacred practice. Not the specific actions our world requires different preparations, but the understanding that rest deserves reverence, that sleep is a gift rather than a given, that the journey into unconsciousness is itself a form of prayer. In the gentle activities that prepare your space for sleep, in the quiet moments that transition your mind from day's concerns to night's peace, in the simple acknowledgement that rest is blessing rather than burden, you participate in the same human longing that shaped medieval evenings. The rituals may change, but the need for gentle surrender, for careful preparation, for grateful transition into the mysterious country of sleep remains as eternal as the turning of earth toward stars. In the deep hours after midnight, when the veil between waking and sleeping grows thin as spider silk, the medieval world entered a realm where visions carried the weight of prophecy and dreams spoke with voices that demanded attention. Margaret, the baker's wife, stirs in her sleep, her mind caught between the familiar warmth of her straw mattress and a dream landscape where her deceased mother kneads bread that glows like starlight. This is not simply the random firing of a sleeping brain, as our modern understanding might suggest, but something the medieval mind recognized as communication from realms beyond ordinary perception. Dreams, in their world, were not mere psychological phenomena, but messages requiring interpretation, visitations demanding response, glimpses into truths that daylight consciousness could not grasp. Margaret's dream carries particular urgency. Her mother, dead these 3 years, speaks without words while working the luminous dough. The message seems to concern the great oak tree behind the bakery, though Margaret cannot understand why. She will wake with the certainty that this vision means something, that her mother's spirit has returned to offer guidance about some danger or opportunity connected to that ancient tree. The medieval understanding of dreams drew from sources, both Christian and pagan, weaving together biblical traditions of divine communication through sleep with older folk wisdom about the night's revelatory power. In monasteries, monks recorded significant dreams in special journals, studying them for spiritual insight. In cottages, grandmothers passed down the ancient art of dream interpretation, teaching their granddaughters to read the symbolic language that sleep made available. Brother Ambrose, keeper of dreams in the monastery library, maintains a careful record of the visions that come to the community during the dangerous hours between midnight and dawn. His journals reveal patterns that speak to the medieval soul's deep concerns. Dreams of angels bearing warnings about coming storms, visions of departed abbots offering guidance on difficult decisions, prophetic images that seem to foretell events in the larger world. Last week, he recorded young Brother Peter's dream of books that bled words onto the floor, a vision that preceded news of the library fire at the monastery in Hastings by 3 days. Such precognitive dreams were not considered supernatural oddities, but natural expressions of souls that had learned to listen to information carried on spiritual currents invisible to waking consciousness. The texture of medieval dreams differed profoundly from our modern sleep visions. Without the constant bombardment of artificial images that shapes contemporary consciousness, the medieval mind created dream landscapes populated by symbols drawn from immediate experience, farming tools that spoke wisdom, domestic animals that carried messages from God, familiar faces that wore the features of saints or demons. In the castle, Lady Catherine experiences dreams shaped by her aristocratic concerns, but touched by the same symbolic language that speaks to peasant and noble alike. Tonight she dreams of her father's sword, rust-covered and mournful, telling her of injustices in the village court that require her intervention. The sword, ancient symbol of authority and justice, becomes the vehicle through which her sleeping conscience communicates knowledge her waking mind has avoided acknowledging. Medieval dream interpretation followed patterns that would seem foreign to our psychological age, but which carried their own profound wisdom. Dreams of water spoke of emotional or spiritual cleansing needed in waking life. Dreams of fire suggested either divine inspiration or destructive passion requiring careful attention. Dreams of flight indicated the soul's desire for freedom from earthly concerns, while dreams of falling warned of pride that needed humbling. The village wise woman, Dame Agatha, serves as the community's primary dream interpreter, a role that places her at the intersection of healing, spirituality, and practical guidance. Her cottage, filled with dried herbs and handwritten books of dream symbols passed down through generations of wise women, becomes a sanctuary where sleep visions are taken as seriously as waking experiences. When young Thomas the Miller's son comes to her with recurring dreams of wolves that speak in his father's voice, Dame Agatha recognizes the symbolic language of family conflict. The wolves represent not external danger but internal struggle, the boy's fear of his father's anger competing with his need for paternal guidance. Her interpretation helps Thomas understand that his dreams are calling him to find courage for a necessary conversation with his father about his future. The medieval night was populated with specific types of dreams that corresponded to the canonical hours of prayer. Dreams that came during vigils, the deepest part of night, were considered most prophetic. Dreams that arrived during Lauds as dawn approached were thought to concern practical matters requiring immediate attention. Dreams of the afternoon nap were often dismissed as mere products of physical fatigue rather than spiritual communication. Father Benedict, the village priest, maintains his own understanding of dreams as divine communication filtered through human consciousness. He teaches that God speaks to his people through sleep visions, but that these messages must be interpreted with careful attention to scripture and church teaching. Not every dream carries divine origin. Some arise from the day's concerns, others from the temptations of demons seeking to mislead souls towards sin. His approach to dream interpretation balances spiritual openness with theological caution. When the blacksmith's wife reports dreams of her deceased infant speaking from heaven, Father Benedict helps her understand these visions as expressions of maternal love and divine comfort rather than literal communications from the dead. His guidance provides peace without encouraging beliefs that might lead to spiritual confusion. The content of medieval dreams reflected the immediate concerns of lives lived close to survival's edge. Dreams of failed harvests preceded years of famine, often enough to be taken seriously as warnings requiring practical preparation. Dreams of invading armies sometimes preceded actual raids by enough time to allow defensive preparation. Whether these prophetic dreams represented supernatural knowledge or unconscious processing of subtle environmental cues, the medieval mind made no such distinction. Wisdom was wisdom regardless of its mechanism. Children's dreams received particular attention, as young minds were thought to be more open to spiritual communication before worldly concerns clouded their perception. Little Anna, the weaver's daughter, dreams repeatedly of spinning wheels that work by themselves, creating thread that shimmers like moonlight. Her grandmother recognizes this as a calling dream, suggesting that Anna possesses unusual gifts for textile work that should be nurtured through special training. The practice of incubation, deliberately seeking dreams to answer specific questions, was common throughout medieval society. Before making important decisions, people would fast, pray, and sleep in sacred spaces, hoping to receive divine guidance through dream visions. Merchants would seek dreams about safe trade routes, farmers about optimal planting times, nobles about marriage alliances and political strategies. The monastery developed elaborate practices around holy dreams, recognizing sleep visions as one of the primary ways God communicated with his people. Monks would prepare for significant dreams through prayer, fasting, and sleeping near holy relics or in places where saints had once rested. The dreams that came during these spiritual preparations were recorded, studied, and sometimes influenced major decisions affecting the entire community. Brother Marcus recalls the dream that came to Abbot Thomas before the decision to expand the monastery's library. In his vision, the abbot saw books with wings flying toward the monastery from all directions, carrying knowledge that would benefit not just the monks but the entire region. This dream provided the spiritual authorization needed to commit substantial resources to acquiring manuscripts and expanding the scriptorium. Nightmares, in the medieval understanding, were not simply products of psychological stress, but spiritual battles fought in the realm of sleep. The terrifying dreams that visited the guilty conscience were seen as opportunities for repentance, while nightmares that struck the innocent were understood as attacks by demonic forces seeking to disturb spiritual peace. The practice of protective prayer before sleep included specific requests for peaceful dreams and protection from evil visions. Crosses were placed over beds, holy water sprinkled on pillows, and sacred words spoken to create spiritual barriers against nightmares. These practices reflected a worldview that took the spiritual dimension of sleep seriously, recognizing dreams as a battlefield where good and evil contended for influence over human souls. Dame Margaret wakes now from her vision of her mother. and the glowing bread, carrying with her the medieval certainty that this dream demands action. She will examine the great oak tree behind her bakery, looking for signs of disease or danger that her mother's spirit has warned her about. Whether her inspection reveals practical problems requiring attention, or whether the dream's meaning unfolds in less literal ways, she approaches her vision with the reverence her culture taught, recognizing sleep as a time when ordinary boundaries dissolve and deeper truths become accessible to the prepared heart. In our age of psychological dream interpretation and sleep science, perhaps we have lost something of this older wisdom, the understanding that dreams carry meaning beyond personal psychology, that sleep opens doorways to forms of knowledge unavailable to waking consciousness, that the night whispers truths that deserve careful attention. The medieval dreamer slept with ears attuned to messages that transcended the merely personal, with hearts prepared to receive guidance from sources beyond individual imagination. Tonight, as you enter your own sleep, consider the possibility that your dreams may carry more than psychological processing, that in the vulnerable hours of unconsciousness, your sleeping mind might touch currents of knowledge, wisdom, and insight that flow beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. Not every dream carries profound meaning, but in the attitude of respectful attention that marked medieval sleep, perhaps some dreams reveal more than we expect. In her small cottage at the edge of Thornbury village, Dame Millicent grinds valerian root by candlelight, her weathered hands moving with the practiced rhythm of 40 years spent coaxing sleep from stubborn herbs. The mortar and pestle, carved from stone by her grandmother's hands, release the earthy scent that speaks of rest to those who have forgotten how to find it naturally. The medieval understanding of sleep as medicine differed profoundly from our modern pharmaceutical approach. Where we see sleep disorders as problems requiring chemical intervention, the medieval healer saw sleeplessness as a symptom of deeper imbalances, spiritual, emotional, or physical harmonies that had fallen out of their natural order and required gentle restoration rather than forceful correction. Dame Millicent's reputation as a sleep bringer draws visitors from villages many miles away, people who have lost the art of peaceful rest and seek her ancient wisdom. Tonight, her cottage receives its most desperate case yet. Young Geoffrey, the merchant's son, who has not slept properly for 3 weeks since witnessing his father's violent death at the hands of brigands on the London road. Geoffrey's sleeplessness carries the particular texture of trauma, the way violent experience can shatter the soul's ability to surrender consciousness. His eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, dart constantly toward windows and doors. His hands shake with the tremor of nerves held too long at alert. His body, though desperate for rest, has forgotten how to trust the vulnerability that sleep requires. Dame Millicent approaches his condition with the holistic wisdom that characterized medieval healing. She understands that Geoffrey's sleeplessness is not simply a physical problem requiring herbal solution, but a spiritual wound requiring careful tending. The medicine she prepares addresses not just the symptoms of insomnia, but the deeper injury to his soul's ability to feel safe in the world. Her first intervention is environmental, creating a space where Geoffrey's hypervigilant nervous system can begin to relax. She positions his sleeping pallet away from windows, ensuring his back is protected by the cottage's thickest wall. She lights specific candles made from beeswax infused with lavender, creating a soft illumination that provides security without harshness. She places a small bowl of water near his bed, explaining that the gentle sound of occasional dripping will give his ears something safe to track. The medieval healer understood that sleep medicine began with atmosphere, with the creation of environments that invited rather than demanded rest. Dame Millicent's cottage itself serves as therapeutic space, its thick walls that muffle outside sounds, It's herbs that scent the air with calming fragrances. It's careful placement of religious icons that provide spiritual protection for vulnerable souls. Her herbal preparations follow recipes passed down through generations of wise women, each ingredient chosen not just for its chemical properties, but for its symbolic meaning in the spiritual pharmacopoeia of sleep. The valerian root speaks to the earth's deep rest. The chamomile flowers carry the sun's gentle warmth. The passion flower vines teach the lesson of surrender that sleep requires. But Dame Millicent knows that Geoffrey's healing requires more than herbs. She prepares a mixture that includes blessed salt from the monastery, water from the holy well of St. Brigid, and honey that has been prayed over by the village priest. This combination acknowledges that some sleep disorders are fundamentally spiritual conditions requiring spiritual medicine alongside physical healing. Her method of preparation is itself therapeutic ritual. She grinds each herb while reciting prayers for Geoffrey's healing, blessing the medicine not just with holy words but with the intention that flows from a healer's trained compassion. The medieval understanding that the healer's state of mind influences the medicine's effectiveness meant that Dame Millicent prepares herself as carefully as she prepares her remedies. The brewing process takes place while Geoffrey watches, allowing him to participate in his own healing rather than simply receiving treatment passively. She explains each ingredient's purpose, teaching him the language of plant medicine that connects human healing to the larger rhythms of natural restoration. This education serves multiple purposes. It provides distraction for his anxious mind, knowledge for future self-care, and the sense of agency that trauma survivors need to rebuild their confidence in their ability to influence their own condition. While the herbal tea steeps, Dame Millicent employs another tool in her healing arsenal: story medicine. She tells Geoffrey tales of other young men who have recovered from similar traumas, not false promises of easy healing, but honest accounts of the gradual return of peace to souls that have been shattered by violence. These stories provide hope, without minimizing his suffering, offering examples of recovery without demanding immediate transformation. Her narrative choice reflects deep understanding of trauma's particular relationship to sleep. Geoffrey's mind has learned to associate unconsciousness with danger, to fear the vulnerability that allowed violence to surprise him. Dame Millicent's stories specifically address this fear, telling of healers and heroes who learn to sleep peacefully again after experiencing terrible events. The physical treatment she provides combines herbal medicine with what we might now recognize as early forms of therapeutic touch. She massages Geoffrey's temples with oil infused with lavender and blessed by the priest, using circular motions that mimic the prayer wheels used in some monastic traditions. The touch is deliberately non-invasive, respecting the trauma survivor's need for control while providing the healing contact that isolated souls require. Her technique reflects the medieval understanding that healing happens through relationship, rather than simply through correct application of remedies. Dame Millicent's presence itself serves as medicine. Her calm breathing, her confident movements, her evident compassion all contribute to creating the atmosphere of safety that Geoffrey's nervous system needs to begin relaxing. The monastery infirmary provides another model of medieval sleep medicine, one that combines herbal healing with liturgical therapy. Brother Physician tends to monks whose sleeplessness often stems from spiritual rather than physical causes. The scrupulosity that keeps consciences awake with worry about minor sins, the intellectual excitement that makes scholarly minds too active for rest, the homesickness that afflicts young novices missing their families. His treatments acknowledge the integrated nature of human beings, addressing body, mind, and spirit as interconnected aspects of health requiring coordinated care. For the scrupulous conscience, he prescribes not just calming herbs, but specific prayers that address spiritual anxiety. For the overstimulated intellect, he combines sedating teas with assigned readings of contemplative texts that channel mental energy toward peaceful focus. The infirmary itself serves as healing environment, its stone walls decorated with frescoes depicting peaceful biblical scenes, the Good Shepherd carrying sleeping lambs, angels watching over sleeping children, Christ sleeping peacefully in the boat during the storm. These images provide visual medicine for minds that have forgotten how to associate sleep with safety. Brother Physician's pharmaceutical knowledge draws from classical texts preserved in the monastery library, but he adapts ancient wisdom to contemporary needs. His sleep remedies include ingredients unavailable to village healers, exotic spices brought by traveling merchants, rare minerals blessed by bishops, waters from distant pilgrimage sites known for their healing properties. But his most sophisticated treatment involves what medieval medicine called the regulation of humours, the balance of bodily fluids that determined physical and emotional health. Sleeplessness was often attributed to excess of choleric or sanguine humours, requiring cooling treatments that included not just herbal medicine, but dietary modifications, controlled exercise, and environmental adjustments. For Geoffrey, this might mean a diet emphasizing cooling foods like lettuce and cucumber, while avoiding heating foods like red meat and strong spices. It might include prescribed walks in the monastery garden during the cool hours of early morning, allowing his overheated system to absorb the calming influence of growing plants. It might involve sleeping on linen rather than wool, surrounding himself with colors that promote tranquility rather than excitement. The medieval approach to sleep medicine also recognized the importance of community in healing. Dame Millicent arranges for Geoffrey to spend his nights in her cottage, not in isolation, but surrounded by the quiet presence of others seeking healing. The gentle breathing of fellow sufferers, the soft sounds of shared sleep, the security of numbers all contribute to the therapeutic environment. This communal approach to healing sleep disorders reflected the medieval understanding that individual health depends on community wellness, that personal healing happens within the context of social support. Geoffrey's recovery is not just his own responsibility, but a shared project involving the healer, the priest, his surviving family members, and the village community that commits to providing ongoing support. As the night deepens and Geoffrey finally succumbs to the gentle influence of herbs, prayer, and healing presence, Dame Millicent maintains her vigil. Medieval sleep medicine included this element of attended rest, the understanding that some souls need the security of wakeful guardianship before they can surrender to sleep's vulnerability. Her watching becomes its own form of prayer, her presence a medicine as important as any herb. In her patient attention to Geoffrey's gradual relaxation, in her readiness to provide comfort if nightmares disturb his rest, in her confident expectation that healing will come gradually but surely, she embodies the medieval understanding that medicine is fundamentally about one human being holding space for another's return to wholeness. The promise of peace that medieval sleep medicine offered was not the quick fix of modern pharmacology, but the slower, deeper healing that comes from addressing root causes rather than suppressing symptoms. In Dame Millicent's gentle ministrations, in Brother Physician's careful balancing of humours, in the community's patient support for Geoffrey's recovery, we see medicine that honoured the complexity of human beings and the time that real healing requires. The sound of the abbey bell rings across the valley, marking the end of the working day as surely as dawn marked its beginning. In workshop and field, manor house and cottage, the medieval world performs its daily ritual of transition from labour to rest. But this is not the sharp division our modern world knows, the sudden cessation of work marked by clock and whistle. Instead, it is a gradual descent into stillness, a gentle yielding that honors both the necessity of labor and the blessing of its temporary end. In the village of Moorhaven, Master Edmund the carpenter sets aside his tools with the deliberate care that marks the end of a craftsman's day. Each tool finds its proper place on the wooden rack his grandfather built, each placement a small ceremony of gratitude for work completed and hope for work to come. The plane slides into its groove with a whisper of satisfaction. The chisels nestle together like sleeping children. The great saw hangs on its peg with the dignity of a knight's sword after honorable battle. This ritual of tool-caring reflects a profound truth about medieval work. It was not separate from life, but woven into it, not opposed to rest, but partnered with it in the great dance of human existence. Edmund's tools are not mere instruments, but companions in the creative act, extensions of his hands that deserve the same consideration he gives to his own body at day's end. His apprentice, young Robert, sweeps the workshop with attention that transforms menial labor into meditation. Each stroke of the broom clears away not just sawdust, but the day's accumulated tension. The rhythm of sweeping becomes a bridge between the alert concentration that fine woodwork requires and the gentler awareness that evening brings. In the great hall of the manor, different rituals mark the transition from day to night. Lady Margaret dismisses her household servants with words of gratitude for the day's service, acknowledging the labor that maintains her station. But this dismissal is not abrupt. It includes inquiry about their families, attention to their needs, recognition of their humanity beyond their function. The servants themselves perform their own end-of-day ceremonies. Sarah, the kitchen maid, banks the fires with care that ensures warmth for morning's work while preventing night's danger. She covers the bread dough that will rise through the dark hours, each bowl wrapped with attention that connects today's labor to tomorrow's nourishment. In the fields surrounding Moorhaven, the rhythm of agricultural work creates its own pattern of rest and labor. The harvesters gather their tools as shadows lengthen, but their cessation comes not by clock, but by the natural limits of useful visibility. When the light grows too dim for safe work with sharp tools, when the grain becomes too difficult to distinguish from weeds, the fields release their workers to the gentle embrace of evening. Thomas the ploughman leads his oxen home with the slow satisfaction of soil well turned, of furrows straight and true, of partnership between human intention and animal strength that has achieved the day's necessary work. His rest will be earned not by hours logged, but by tasks completed, by the visible progress that marks human effort aligned with natural rhythm. The monastery provides the most structured transition from work to rest, the canonical hours creating a framework that acknowledges both the necessity of labor and the priority of contemplation. At Vespers, the evening prayer that marks the day's formal end, Brother Francis sets aside his manuscript copying with a prayer of gratitude for words preserved, for knowledge transmitted, for the sacred work of maintaining human learning. But even here, in the most regulated of medieval communities, the transition carries gentleness rather than abruptness. The bells that call to prayer do not demand immediate cessation, but announce the approaching time for rest, allowing each monk to find a natural stopping place in his particular labor. The scriptorium falls quiet gradually, each monk finishing his current line or paragraph before setting aside his quill. The copying of sacred texts cannot be rushed without introducing errors, so the evening bell serves as invitation rather than command, allowing holy work to find its natural completion. Brother Thomas, keeper of the herb garden, performs his own evening ritual of gratitude and preparation. He waters the plants that provide medicine for the community, each ladleful of water a prayer for continued growth and healing. He checks the drying herbs hanging in the garden shed, ensuring proper preservation of the summer's medicinal harvest. His work with plants has taught him the natural rhythms that govern all living things, the daily cycle of opening and closing, the seasonal progression of growth and dormancy, the eternal dance between effort and rest that sustains all life. His own rest comes not as interruption of this pattern, but as participation in it. In the merchant quarter of the nearest town, the cessation of commerce follows its own rhythm. The cloth merchant carefully folds his wares as the market day ends, each piece of fabric receiving attention that acknowledges both its beauty and its value. The spice seller closes his exotic jars with reverence for the distant lands and long journeys represented in their contents. These merchants understand that their work connects them to a vast network of human effort. The sheep that provided wool, the farmers who grew dye plants, the weavers who transformed raw materials into finished goods, the carriers who transported finished products to distant markets. Their rest carries awareness of this interdependence, gratitude for the countless hands that make their livelihood possible. The blacksmith's workshop offers perhaps the most dramatic transition from work to rest. Master Henrik banks his forge, with careful attention to the fire that has been his partner throughout the day. The great bellows fall silent. The hammer finds its rest on the anvil. The hot iron cools to darkness in the gathering twilight. But Henrik's rest carries the deep satisfaction of transformation accomplished. Raw metal shaped into useful tools, broken implements restored to function, creative fire partnered with human skill to serve the community's needs. His sleep will be earned by the honest ache of muscles well used, by the sight of completed work arranged on his bench, by the knowledge that his craft serves purposes larger than personal gain. The children of Moorhaven experience their own version. Of work's end, their labour scaled to their abilities, but no less real for being small. Little Catherine helps her mother tend the kitchen garden, her small hands learning the difference between vegetables and weeds, her young mind absorbing the patterns that connect human care to natural abundance. When evening comes, Catherine sets aside her child-sized tools with the same ceremony she has watched in adult workers. Her play, too, has been work, the serious business of learning the skills she will need as a woman, the patient practice that transforms games into competence. The village wise woman, Dame Agatha, performs her own evening ritual of transition from the day's healing work to night's restorative rest. She checks her stores of medicinal herbs, ensures her preparations are properly sealed, reviews the day's treatments in her memory for lessons that might improve tomorrow's healing. But her work never truly ends. The healer must be available for emergencies, ready to rise from sleep when fever spikes or injury strikes. Her rest carries the particular quality of professional readiness, sleep that remains alert to the community's needs while still providing the restoration her own body requires. As full darkness settles over Moorhaven and the last workshop grows quiet, the medieval world demonstrates its understanding that work and rest are not opposites, but partners in the larger rhythm of human existence. The transition from one to the other requires ceremony, attention, and gratitude, recognition that both labor and rest serve purposes beyond individual need. In our modern world of time clocks and rigid schedules, perhaps we have lost something of this medieval wisdom, the understanding that work deserves reverent conclusion, that tools deserve grateful care, that rest is most peaceful when it follows completed effort. The medieval transition from work to rest honored both the necessity of human labor and the blessing of its temporary suspension, creating a rhythm that served both productivity and peace. Tonight, as you set aside your own day's work and prepare for rest, consider the medieval understanding that this transition deserves attention and ceremony. In the careful completion of tasks, in the grateful acknowledgement of effort expended, in the peaceful yielding to rest's embrace, you participate in the same human rhythm that has sustained communities across centuries of labor and love. As the final rays of sunlight fade behind the hills surrounding Millbrook Village, the church bell begins its gentle summons to Vespers, and throughout the community, hearts turn toward the ancient rhythm of evening prayer. This is not the hurried devotion of morning, rushed between urgent tasks, but the deeper meditation that comes when day's labor is done and souls can finally settle into contemplation of eternal things. In her small cottage beside the baker's shop, Widow Margot kneels before a simple wooden crucifix, her weathered hands clasped in the position her mother taught her 70 years ago. Her evening prayer carries the accumulated weight of a long day spent kneading bread for the village, of small kindnesses offered and received, of the persistent ache in joints that remind her of time's passage and mortality's approach. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit, she whispers, the ancient words carrying personal meaning, refined by decades of repetition. Tonight, as every night, she offers her concerns to hands larger than her own. Worry for her granddaughter's difficult pregnancy, gratitude for the day's sufficient food, hope that her arthritic hands will serve for another season of bread making. Her prayer is both deeply personal and thoroughly communal, connecting her small cottage to the vast fellowship of souls who speak these same words in countless languages across the Christian world. In monasteries and cathedrals, in humble homes and royal chambers, the evening prayer rises like incense toward heaven, creating a net of devotion that holds the faithful safe through the dangerous hours of darkness. The village church fills slowly with those who seek the comfort of shared prayer. Master Robert the carpenter arrives still carrying the sweet scent of wood shavings, his day's work honored by hands that shaped useful things for his neighbor's needs. Dame Eleanor, the weaver, comes bearing the geometric precision of patterns successfully completed, her mind still moving in the rhythms that transform thread into cloth. Young Father Benedict leads the service with the gentle authority of one who understands his role as shepherd to souls who hunger for peace. His voice, trained in the ancient chants that have sustained the faithful for centuries, creates sacred space through sound, melody that lifts hearts above immediate concerns toward contemplation of eternal rest. The Vespers service itself follows, patterns older than memory, each response and antiphon worn smooth by countless repetitions, yet still capable of carrying fresh meaning for hearts prepared to receive it. O Lord, make haste to help me, the congregation responds, acknowledging both human weakness and divine strength in words that have comforted the troubled for over 1,000 years. But perhaps the most profound evening prayers happen in solitude, in the private conversations between individual souls and their Creator that need no formal liturgy to find their way to heaven. In the castle chamber where Lady Catherine prepares for sleep, in the monastery cell where Brother Thomas examines his conscience, in the shepherd's hut where young Martin tends his flock, the evening prayer takes forms as varied as the heart that offer them. Lady Catherine's devotions follow the elaborate pattern prescribed for her noble station. Formal prayers from her beautifully illuminated Book of Hours, devotions to particular saints who protect travelers, mothers, and those who govern others. But beneath the prescribed words flow personal appeals for wisdom in dealing with difficult tenants, for patience with her husband's political ambitions, for protection of the child she carries beneath her heart. Her prayers acknowledge the weight of responsibility that comes with privilege, the understanding that her comfortable life obligates her to care for those less fortunate. As she prays for the souls in her husband's domain, for fair dealing in the manor court, for generous response to the poor who seek her charity, her evening devotion becomes itself a form of governance, the spiritual exercise that prepares her for righteous use of earthly power. In the monastery, Brother Thomas performs the examination of conscience that Benedictine spirituality requires at day's end. This is not the morbid self-flagellation that critics sometimes imagine, but the gentle honesty that allows spiritual growth. He reviews the day's thoughts, words, and actions, not to torment himself with guilt, but to learn the patterns that lead toward holiness and those that lead away from it. His examination includes gratitude for grace received, moments of unexpected, beauty in the garden, patience that came when needed during a difficult conversation with a fellow monk, the satisfaction of meaningful work completed with skill and attention. But it also includes honest acknowledgement of failures, the flash of irritation when his concentration was interrupted, the moment of pride when his knowledge impressed a visiting scholar, the times when charity failed and self-interest asserted itself. This daily practice of spiritual accounting serves multiple purposes in the monastery's understanding of growth toward holiness. It develops the habit of spiritual attention, the ability to notice God's presence in ordinary moments. It cultivates humility through honest recognition of human limitation. It creates gratitude through deliberate attention to grace received. Most importantly, it prepares the soul for peaceful sleep by clearing away the day's accumulated spiritual debris. Young Martin, alone with his sheep on the hillside above the village, offers his own form of evening prayer under the vast cathedral of stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. His devotion needs no formal words. It flows naturally from a heart that has spent the day in intimate partnership with God's creation, that has seen the divine hand in the grass that feeds his flock, in the weather that protects or threatens, in the countless small miracles that sustain life. His prayer carries the particular quality of those who work in solitude with living things, a trust in providence that comes from daily witnessing of the mysterious forces that govern growth and protection. He has seen ewes mother orphaned lambs not their own, has watched his flock find safety in storms through instincts he cannot explain, has witnessed the resurrection of grass after drought that seems to promise hope beyond all human understanding. This evening prayer of children carries its own special quality, the trust that has not yet been complicated by adult anxieties, the ability to speak to God with the same simplicity they bring to conversations with parents and friends. Little Susan, the miller's daughter, kneels beside her bed and lists the day's blessings with the thoroughness that only children bring to such accounting. The cat that let her pet it, the successful gathering of eggs from temperamental hens, the story her grandmother told while they spun together in the afternoon. But her prayer also includes the fears that trouble young minds in a dangerous world, worry about wolves that might threaten the livestock, concern for her aunt who coughs too much, the persistent anxiety about whether her father's mill wheel will continue to turn properly. Her simple faith that God hears and cares for these small concerns reflects the medieval understanding that no detail of human life is too minor for divine attention. In the convent beyond the village, the nuns gather for their own evening prayer, their voices joining in harmonies that seem to lift earthbound concerns toward celestial peace. Sister Agnes, the novice mistress, leads the antiphon with the deep satisfaction of vocation fulfilled, of life aligned with eternal purpose through the willing sacrifice of temporary pleasures. Their evening prayer acknowledges both the privilege and the responsibility of lives dedicated entirely to divine service. They pray for the world they have left behind, but continue to serve through intercession for families they will not bear but love through spiritual motherhood, for the temporal concerns they have renounced but support through contemplative prayer. As the last light fades completely and the village settles into the quiet that precedes sleep, the evening prayers rise from every cottage, every chapel, every corner where human hearts seek peace. These prayers create a canopy of devotion that protects the community through the vulnerable hours of darkness, a spiritual shield woven from individual faith but strengthened by communal practice. The medieval understanding of evening prayer recognized something we perhaps have forgotten, that rest is not simply the cessation of activity, but the conscious placement of human concerns into hands more capable than our own. The evening prayer serves as transition between the worries that belong to daylight consciousness and the peace that makes sleep possible. In the gentle words that acknowledge human limitation and divine sufficiency, in the gratitude that recognizes grace received and hope for grace to come, in the trust that allows conscious beings to surrender awareness without losing essential protection, the evening prayer creates the spiritual conditions that make peaceful rest not just possible but
inevitable tonight as you prepare for your own rest.
Consider the medieval wisdom that understood evening prayer not as obligation but as gift, the opportunity to release the day's accumulated concerns into care more reliable than human vigilance, to acknowledge blessings received and trust in blessings yet to come, to participate in the vast fellowship of souls who have found in prayer the bridge between human effort and divine peace. The last candle gutters in its holder, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls of Dame Beatrice's cottage as she settles into the straw mattress that has been her nightly refuge for 37 years. Outside, the village of Willowmere lies, wrapped in darkness so complete that modern minds can barely imagine its depth. No streetlights pierce the night, no electric glow marks human presence, only the occasional flicker of firelight through shuttered windows and the eternal dance of stars across the vast cathedral of sky. This is the darkness that shaped medieval rest, not the mere absence of light that we know, easily banished by the flip of a switch, but a presence in its own right, a companion that arrived each evening with gifts of peace, mystery, and the profound quiet that allows souls to settle into the deepest rest. Dame Beatrice has learned to welcome this darkness as farmers welcome rain, understanding it not as enemy, but as necessary partner in the rhythm of days. Her final ritual of the evening is the careful extinguishing of her single candle, an act that requires the same deliberate attention she brings to all transitions between one state and another. She pauses before blowing out the flame, offering a brief prayer of gratitude for the light that has guided her through evening's tasks, and a request for protection through the hours of vulnerability that lie ahead. The darkness that claims her. Cottage carries sounds unknown to our electrically illuminated world. The settling of timbers as the day's warmth leaves the wood, the scurrying of mice in the walls going about their own necessary business, the distant calling of owls conducting their nighttime conversations. These sounds, which might seem threatening to modern ears, speak to Dame Beatrice of the continuing life that surrounds human rest, the vast community of creatures with whom she shares the night. Her breathing slows to match the rhythm of darkness itself, the deep inhalation and exhalation that connects her individual rest to the breathing of the sleeping world. Outside her window, the night is far from empty. Foxes hunt through meadows, bats dance their aerial ballets, nocturnal flowers open their faces to moonlight, and countless small lives continue their ancient patterns under cover of darkness. This understanding of night as a time of different rather than absent life shaped the medieval approach to sleep. Rest came not as escape from the world, but as participation in its nighttime transformation, as conscious yielding to the darker half of existence that held its own wisdom and its own forms of blessing. In the monastery beyond the village, Brother Francis completes the day's final prayer office, Compline, the night prayer that officially ends the monastic day and begins the great silence that will last until dawn. His voice joins with those of his brothers in the ancient words that acknowledge both human frailty and divine protection. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. The monastery's approach to night's arrival is perhaps the most sophisticated response to darkness that the medieval world developed. The great silence that begins with Compline is not mere absence of speech, but positive presence of peace, a communal practice of letting go that allows the entire community to sink together into restorative rest. Brother Francis moves through the darkened corridors to his cell with feet that know every stone, every turning, every slight irregularity in the path. This knowledge of one's environment in darkness speaks to the medieval understanding that true rest requires deep familiarity with one's surroundings, the trust that comes from intimate knowledge of the spaces that hold sleep. His cell, barely large enough for a straw pallet and a small table for his prayer book, represents the medieval ideal of sleeping space, simple, clean, oriented toward rest rather than comfort, designed to serve the body's need for shelter while keeping the soul's attention focused on eternal rather than temporal concerns. The darkness in his cell is complete, unmarked by any artificial light, creating the conditions that medieval spirituality understood as necessary for the deepest rest. In this absolute darkness, freed from visual stimulation and the constant input of daily concerns, Brother Francis can sink into the interior darkness that contemplatives recognize as the place where human consciousness meets divine mystery. In The Castle on the Hill, a different but equally profound encounter with night's arrival takes place. Lady Eleanor dismisses her waiting women and settles into the great bed she shares with her lord, their sleep a partnership that reflects their waking alliance in governing the lands and people under their care. The darkness that enters their chamber through tall windows carries with it the weight of responsibility that cannot be entirely set aside even in sleep. Lady Eleanor's rest carries awareness of the hundreds of souls who depend on her justice, her charity, her wise counsel in matters both great and small. Her dreams, when they come, will often feature the faces of those she serves, the widow seeking protection from aggressive neighbors, the merchant requesting fair judgment in a disputed contract, the children whose future depends on decisions made in the manor court. But tonight, as every night, she practices the aristocratic art of conscious surrender, the deliberate setting aside of earthly authority in acknowledgement of the higher authority that governs even earthly rulers. Her final prayer before sleep acknowledges both the burden and the privilege of power, placing her stewardship into hands more capable than her own. The darkness that claims the castle is different from the cottage darkness, but equally profound. Through windows glazed with real glass, a luxury beyond the reach of common folk, Lady Eleanor can see the lights scattered throughout the village below, each flickering point representing a family settling into rest, a hearth banked for the night, a candle being extinguished as another soul yields to sleep's embrace. In the humblest cottage at the village edge, old Godwin the shepherd settles into sleep with the deep satisfaction of a man whose life has aligned with natural rhythms. For 73 years, His bones ache with the honest pain of a body well used in service of necessary work, but his rest carries the profound peace of those who have found their place in the larger order of things. His sleep comes easily because his day has been lived in partnership with forces beyond human control, weather that must be accepted rather than changed, animals whose needs must be understood rather than imposed upon, seasons that follow their own schedule regardless of human preference. This daily practice of working with rather than against natural law has prepared him for the ultimate surrender that sleep requires. The darkness in his cottage is companionable rather than threatening, filled with the familiar sounds of a life lived in harmony with its surroundings. His few sheep, sheltered in the pen beside his dwelling, shift and breathe in rhythms that match his own approaching sleep. The mice in his walls go about their business with the confidence of creatures who have learned they have nothing to fear from this particular human. Godwin's dreams, when they come, will be pastoral visions that blend memory with hope. Green meadows where his flocks have grazed, faces of sheep he has known and loved across decades of careful tending, the changing seasons that have marked the passage of his years. His sleeping mind will rehearse the ancient partnership between human shepherd and woolly charges, finding in these nocturnal visions the meaning that has sustained his simple but profound vocation. In the village inn, a different kind of sleep settles over the temporary inhabitants, merchants pausing in their journeys, pilgrims seeking rest between sacred destinations, messengers carrying news between distant places. Their sleep carries the particular quality of the temporarily housed, rest that must be found in unfamiliar surroundings without the deep security that comes from sleeping in known places. Master Hugh, the innkeeper, understands his role as guardian of others' rest, his own sleep necessarily lighter than his guests', as he maintains vigilance against the dangers that threaten travellers in vulnerable moments. His establishment serves as island of safety in a world where movement between settlements carries real risk, where darkness can hide bandits as easily as it conceals honest folk seeking rest. The common room below the sleeping chambers holds its own kind of peace, the fire banked but not extinguished, ready to provide warmth and light if emergency should arise, the heavy bar across the door that speaks of security earned through careful preparation rather than taken for granted. The inn's darkness is protective rather than merely empty, created through human effort to serve human needs. As midnight approaches and the village settles into the deepest phase of night's rest, the medieval understanding of sleep as communal experience becomes most apparent. In cottages throughout Willowmere, families sleep together not merely for warmth, but for the security that comes from shared vulnerability, the comfort of familiar breathing, the knowledge that others share the risk that consciousness's surrender entails. The night sounds that fill the darkness speak of this continuing community. The cry of a baby answered by a mother's comforting voice, the murmur of prayer from a cottage where illness requires vigilant watching, the gentle conversation of spouses sharing the day's concerns before yielding to sleep's embrace. Even in rest, the medieval world maintained its understanding that individual welfare depends on communal care. The church bell that marked the day's beginning will mark its end as well, tolling the hour of matins for those who choose to rise, for prayer in the deepest part of night. But for most villagers, this sound serves not as summons, but as reassurance, confirmation that time continues its ancient progression, that the community's spiritual guardians maintain their watch, that the rhythm of prayer continues even when individual consciousness surrenders to sleep. Dame Beatrice, now deep in the sleep that has claimed her cottage, breathes with the slow rhythm of profound rest. Her dreams carry the accumulated wisdom of a life lived in harmony with natural cycles, the peaceful acceptance that comes from understanding one's place in the larger pattern of existence. Her sleep serves not as escape from life, but as participation in its deeper mysteries. In the monastery, Brother Francis has entered the contemplative sleep that represents the pinnacle of medieval spiritual practice. Rest that maintains awareness of divine presence, even in unconsciousness. Sleep that serves as prayer. Dreams that carry messages from the eternal realm that contemplatives spend their waking hours seeking to approach. Young Martin, alone with his flock on the hillside, sleeps the watchful sleep of those whose rest must remain alert to responsibility. His dreams blend with reality as he maintains semi-conscious awareness of his charges while allowing his body the restoration it requires. His sleep demonstrates the medieval understanding that rest can be both deep and responsive, peaceful and vigilant. The medieval day finds its end not in the abrupt cessation that electric lights allow, but in the gradual transition that honors both the necessity of rest and the continuity of life. The darkness that claims the village is not empty but full, filled with dreams and prayers, with the breathing of sleepers and the vigilance of watchers, with the vast community of life that continues its ancient patterns under cover of night. As the last conscious mind in Willowmere yields to sleep's embrace, the night reveals its deepest truth, that rest is not the opposite of life, but one of its most essential expressions. Not escape from community, but participation in its most profound form. The medieval understanding of sleep as sacred time, of rest as trust, of dreams as communication with realms beyond ordinary perception, created a relationship with night that honored both human vulnerability and divine protection. In our age of artificial illumination and controlled environments, perhaps we have lost something of this older wisdom, the understanding that darkness has its own gift, that sleep connects us to mysteries larger than personal consciousness, that rest is not merely individual necessity but communal sacrament. The medieval night, with all its dangers and uncertainties, offered a form of peace that our safer but more isolated sleep may struggle to match. Tonight, as you prepare for your own rest, in circumstances far safer than any medieval sleeper could, consider the wisdom that found in darkness, not enemy, but friend, in sleep, not escape, but deepest participation in the rhythm of existence, in the gentle yielding to unconsciousness that comes with nightfall, in the trust that allows awareness to fade while life continues, in the hope that tomorrow will bring another chance to participate in the great work of being human. You join the eternal community of those who have found in sleep not ending, but transformation. The medieval day found its end in surrender, to darkness that held mystery rather than emptiness, to rest that connected rather than isolated, to sleep that served not just individual restoration, but the continuation of the vast web of existence that holds all things in its patient embrace. In learning to welcome night as partner rather than enduring it as enemy, perhaps we too might find a deeper peace, a more profound rest, a sleep that serves not just our bodies but our souls.